Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, Wilder historian Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time Union General William F. Smith attacked Petersburg, gained significant ground, but failed to push further. Then Winfield Scott Hancock attacked the Confederate earthworks, gaining more ground, but didn't capture Petersburg. Now, more Union troops flocked to the area outside of Petersburg to dislodge the Confederates from that important city. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Hearing of the attacks and the fact that Union General-in-Chief Ulysses S. Grant was now outside Petersburg, United States President Abraham Lincoln remarked to the Great Central Sanitary Fair in Philadelphia, "I have never been in the habit of making predictions in regard to the war. But Grant is this evening, with General George Meade and General Winfield Scott Hancock, and the brave officers and soldiers with him, in a position from whence he will never be dislodged until Richmond is taken." Benjamin Butler at Bermuda Hundred sent Grant a message informing him that between 40 and 50,000 Confederates were seen north of the James River. This meant a great deal to Grant because this indicated that Lee didn't know where he was, and this presented a great opportunity to strike at and capture Petersburg. While the commander of the Army of the Potomac, George Meade, was away from the front lines, Hancock commanded those troops. Meade tasked Hancock with attacking the Confederates again on June 17th. The previous day, the brunt of the bloody attack was taken by Hancock's own 2nd Corps. Now Hancock chose the fresh 9th Corps troops of Ambrose Burnside to make the attack. Robert Brown Potter's division and James Ledley's division would make the attack. Potter was from New York, where he practiced law before the war. When hostilities broke out, he joined the New York militia as a private and quickly rose up the ranks, commanding the 51st New York and leading that regiment across Burnside Bridge at the Battle of Antietam. Under Burnside, Potter would obtain the rank of brigadier general and command a division in the 9th Corps at the Siege of Vicksburg, the Knoxville Campaign, and during the Overland Campaign. Potter began assembling his men after midnight on June 17th, moving his troops through some of the battle-worn 2nd Corps troops. By 3 a.m., Potter's men were so close to the Confederate lines that they could hear the conversations of the enemy. As soon as the day dawned, Potter's men rushed forward in silence, taking much of the rebel position with the bayonet. About a mile of fortifications fell to Potter's men in an hour. Despite the success, Ledley's division didn't make an attack, and neither did any other Union troops. Potter had broken the Confederate line, but as with the previous days, no units were dispatched to follow up on the success. One soldier commented, "Had a single corps been on the ground in position, or had the divisions, which were ordered to support us, been ready to advance, the fearful carnage of the 2 preceding days would doubtless have been prevented, and the long, tedious, wasting, bloody siege of Petersburg might have been avoided." That morning, the 5th Corps arrived on the Union left, and 2 divisions from Horatio Wright's 6th Corps were at Bermuda Hundred, with the 3rd Division from that corps coming to Petersburg. Grant wanted Benjamin Butler to hold his toehold position at Bermuda Hundred, not realizing that Butler had been pushed back by George Pickett's division the previous evening. Butler requested that his 18th Corps be transferred back to Bermuda Hundred and be used in the attack because they knew the terrain, which meant that Grant would need to transfer the 2 6th Corps divisions across the Appomattox River to Petersburg and move the 18th Corps across the same river, switching the positions of the 2 corps. The fog of war plagued the Confederates as well. The Confederate Army commander Robert E. Lee desperately wanted information as to Grant's whereabouts. P.G.T. Beauregard at Petersburg, in one dispatch, claimed with some reinforcements he could crush the enemy. In another dispatch, he claimed multiple corps were in his front and he faced disaster. In another message, he claimed the 5th Corps was moving west to confront Jubal Early's corps in the Shenandoah Valley. Lee was perplexed as to the situation. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., Lee's son and cavalry officer Rooney Lee saw the pontoon bridge across the James and identified Grant's location. The Army of the Potomac was south of the James River. Before Lee got that information, Burnside's corps was preparing for another attack. Orlando B. Wilcox, a classmate at West Point with his corps commander, formed up his division to attack the Confederate division of Bushrod Johnson. Wilcox served in the Old Army for 10 years before leaving the service to practice law. He led the 1st Michigan Regiment at 1st Manassas, was wounded and captured, spending over a year as a prisoner of war. When he got out, he was made a brigadier general and put in Burnside's corps. Burnside assigned Major James Morton from his staff to deploy, align, and direct the division in its attack. The troops formed up in their positions by midday. The Confederates, already pushed back from Potter's morning attack, entrenched again, readying themselves for another assault. At 2 p.m., Wilcox's men stepped off toward the rebel lines. The alignment was a little skewed, but as the Federals neared the enemy works, they could see the Confederates starting to remove their artillery. But before they made contact, Morton ordered the brigade to perform a half-route wheel, which exposed their flank to the enemy. The brigade traveled a good distance with their flank to the enemy before breaking. The brigade behind John Hartramp didn't even make it that far and began to dig in their advanced position. Burnside had asked for support for his division, but none came on the left with Governor K. Warren's 5th Corps, and only Nelson Miles's brigade from the 2nd Corps made any demonstration, and that was a small one. A Wisconsin soldier succinctly described the attack by saying, "Verily, it was a harvest of death." Meade knew that the opportunity to capture Petersburg would soon be closing, as Lee would become more aware of how many troops confronted Beauregard. So he ordered another attack. Another division from Burnside's corps would make the assault, the one under James Ledlie. Ledlie's 1st Infantry Command came about a month before the Overland Campaign began. He had been in the artillery before that, but his political connections allowed him to rise up the ranks, becoming a brigade commander, and by the time he was outside Petersburg, he commanded a division. At the Battle of North Anna, he was drunk and got his brigade horribly bloodied in that fight. Petersburg was no different. As his men formed up, Ledlie became drunk. One of his soldiers remembered the scene. Our division commander was in no condition to exercise command of anything at that time. The supply of artificial courage which he had taken carried him beyond the proper counterpoise, and rendered him hors de combat, in which condition he remained in the ravine. Jacob Parker Gould would ultimately take command of the division. Gould was a civil engineer before the war. He saw action at Antietam and Gettysburg in the 13th Massachusetts. Now he commanded a brigade in Ledlie's division. But with Ledlie incapacitated, Gould now commanded the division. At about sunset, the division moved forward. They quickly captured a portion of the Confederate earthworks, and then the real fighting began, with Gould's troops engaging with the rebels who were now attacking from 3 angles. Francis Barlow's division on the right made a small demonstration, and 3 regiments from Wilcox's division assisted Gould in their exposed position. Samuel Crawford's division of the 5th Corps made a half-hearted attack on Gould's left flank, but they wouldn't remain on the front lines long, and fell back. Gould's men battled with the Confederates until 10 p.m., when their ammunition began to run out. A courier ran back to find Ledlie and ask for ammunition. The courier found Ledlie on the floor of a tent, drunk. The courier asked, "General, the troops have no ammunition. I was sent to request some ammunition." Ledlie roused up and asked, "What troops?" "The troops under your command," came the reply. Ledlie said, "Let the troops go to hell." Many were in it, fighting for their lives, and by midnight it was no use to hold out any longer, and Gould's men pulled back. Another day had been wasted by Union forces by not capturing Petersburg when the least amount of enemy troops were guarding the city. Meade failed to coordinate his army in an attack, resulting in individual divisions launching themselves at the Confederate entrenchments. Grant remained detached as to the situation on the Petersburg and Bermuda Hundred fronts. Meanwhile, Lee began moving more and more troops south of the James River